Hello, nerds, and welcome to the Geek Girl Story Salon, where we talk with creatives from across disciplines and across the world about the art of storytelling. I'm your host, Jen Jackalone, lifelong storyteller and head geek in charge. Today, I'm going to be talking with my friend, author Susan Kaye Quinn. If you're not lucky enough to know her work, she's an environmental engineer and rocket scientist turned speculative fiction author who uses her PhD to, and I quote, invent cool stuff in books, and I can vouch for that. We're going to be talking about her journey from scientist to storyteller and why she's gone all in on the genre known as Hopepunk. Great to see you, Susan. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on. I've been wanting to do this for a while and have a proper sit down and hear all the stories. So, first of all, how's the family? How's the robot staff?
The robot staff is doing well. Billy is out mowing the lawn as we speak.
Okay.
The cat litter bots are, well, one of our cats is staging a strike against the litter bot, which is really unfortunate. We have an interspecies labor dispute,
I see.
but the rest of it's going pretty well. The Roombas are great.
The
Love
Roombas
the
are wonderful.
Yes.
How do so do the Roombas have names as well?
They do. There's Mr. Clean for the first floor and Dust Bunny for the second floor because it's just too much of a hassle to move them up and down. So they each had to have their own. So,
I get it. I get it. And the lawn boy, yeah, he's a solar powered thing, isn't he?
yeah. Well, everything is solar powered for me these days
Right.
because of my solar panels, and
Mhm,
the lawn droid is electric. All the bots are electric.
mhm.
So anything that's electric in my house is running on solar, which is yay.
That's so cool. Um, so all right. So you've worked at NASA. You have a bunch of engineering degrees. You clearly had quite a career in science. What precipitated the move to writing fiction?
Well, that's a great question. And it wasn't like, just making a switch. I think there were two things. First of all, I was kind of a writer all along. I wrote short stories. I even wrote a screenplay, which I unearthed like when I was a teenager. I unearthed from my parents' house. So, like, I'd been a writer for a long time. And I kind of put that away to become an engineer, especially in the 80s and 90s for a woman.
Mhm,
It was like, you need to be serious to be taken seriously, and you can't be doing fiction.
mhm,
And thankfully, I feel like a lot of that has changed culturally.
mhm,
Um, but at the time, like, I ended up repressing a lot of my creative urges. And later on, I ended up like leaving science to have kids. And I tried to do science and kids for a while. And
mhm.
the 90s, that was also a very hard thing for women to do.
Yeah.
So by the time number two child came along, I was just like, okay, I'm not going to live to see my children grow up because this is just killing me. So I stayed home with my kids for a little while, and then I
Mhm,
always knew I would come back.
mhm.
And it was just I searched. I did a lot of wayfinding in some really weird, creative ways before
Okay.
remembering that I
Mhm.
was a writer. I was like,
What
oh yeah,
what
I
kind of
did
ways?
this.
See, I have to ask, what kind of ways?
I did these like really elaborate birthday parties for my kids where we would like build sets and have like
Wow.
costumes, like all the kids would have a
Wow.
costume.
Wow.
And I did like these elaborate birthday cakes. So it was always like, in service of family. It was
Mhm,
very
mhm,
acceptably, traditionally
mhm,
feminine
mhm.
activities,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Because it was very safe to explore it that way.
Right.
And it was very clear to me that like not only did I want to do creative stuff, I also wanted to do entrepreneurial stuff. Like being my own boss was very,
Mhm,
very attractive.
mhm,
My mom ran her own business as a counselor, and I looked up to her greatly. And so when indie publishing came along, that became a very natural fit for me.
Mm,
And that's what actually made my writing career. But I started being a writer, like deciding I was a writer for a few
mm,
years before indie publishing was even an option.
mm.
Just because I just sat down one day and started writing chapter one and just like, oh gosh, this is like a thing I can do. And I was just sucked
Right,
into it right away.
right. And this is how many years ago now?
This was in 2009.
Wow.
So
Okay.
15 years, 14 years. So that's when I technically started writing full
Right,
time. That's
right.
where I count it. But I had dabbled along the way. And like I said, I
Sure.
wrote when I was a kid. So it wasn't like I was starting from zero. And I also
Mhm.
did a lot of, prior to that, I trial ran a career in politics. And
Right. You
so
served on a school board, yeah?
for 4 years.
Uh-huh.
And so I did a lot of persuasive writing and speaking at that
Hmm.
time as part of the
Hmm.
job and as part of getting elected. And that informs a lot of my um, just sort of like comfort with expressing myself with the written word,
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
that was a little more natural. Now then it was, and prior to that it was nonfiction. Like I had to do a lot of, you write a PhD thesis, that's a lot of words.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and you have
Right.
to communicate like scientifically.
Right.
So
Right.
it wasn't like writing was foreign to me, but
Hmm.
fiction, very, very different, and had to, in a lot of ways, start over and really learn that craft from the beginning.
Right. Because it is its own thing. It's not like
Yeah.
academic writing, but the seeds were kind of there. And that's the way I think it is for a lot of people who transition from something into writing, is that there was always that bug was there and it just kind of came out. Um, so, given that you have all of this fantastic scientific background, do you consider your work, and you probably got this question before, do you consider your work hard sci-fi? And I'm going to put quotes around that.
Um, yes and no. Like, I
Okay.
would say, I'd say right now, today, if you picked up my latest series, super hard, near future, 5 minutes into the future kind
Mhm.
of science.
Mhm.
However, one of my very earliest stories, the one that I indie published to launch my career, was about mind readers and mind jackers. It was very much in the tradition of social science fiction.
Mhm.
And I stayed away, like far, far away from hard science fiction for a long, long time. And it was
Hmm.
a bit of my own personal journey as a writer to
Mhm.
begin to integrate. It was almost like I had to reject my creative side to become an engineer. And then I had to
Mhm.
like reject the engineering side to become a creative. And then,
Mhm.
like, by our powers combined, we
Right.
finally figured out how to be a whole person.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, it's,
that's a new thing for me.
well, and we're all enjoying the benefits of that. Um,
Thank you.
I'm full disclosure, I'm halfway through this new series, and we're going to
Okay.
talk about it more later. But I want to have kind of the general question first, which is, we've been connected over social media for a few years now, and I've kind of been watching you transition from that, I guess, more traditional, I don't know, social sci-fi, into what, we're all calling hope punk now. Um, so I guess just for the uninitiated, how would you describe that genre?
Um, it doesn't have a really set definition. So this is Sue's definition. And I'd like to preface this always with it's very new. It's being co-created by everyone who writes it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm writing my version of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to think of it as being, and then this will be in common with what a lot of people's ideas
Right.
are.
Right.
Radical compassion, cooperative storytelling, not the hero's journey, but the heroine's journey, which is more of a collaborative, cooperative mechanism for solving your story problems.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Things that lots of justice issues, lots of just like the inversion of everything that is our hyper individualistic capitalistic society, just like take the opposite of that.
Right.
And that's kind of where Hope Punk lives.
Right.
And I like to say there's like 10 elements to it, but then everybody wants me to name the 10, and I can't always off the top of my head. But there's like, if you can imagine, there's like
Right.
10 sort of aspects to that.
Mhm.
And what I try to write, I wouldn't even say is a 10 out of 10 hope punk all the time. I'm probably in like, the 7, 8, 9 range. Something like Becky Chambers' Monk and Robot,
Mhm.
which is a very cozy kind of vibe to it.
Mhm.
That's like in my opinion, that would be like a 10 out of 10 hope
Okay.
punk kind of thing. But it's starting to creep into mainstream storytelling. So you'll see things like Last of Us has like a thread of these unconventional, it's like, yeah, it's fungus zombie apocalypse, but
Mhm.
it's also not, because the people who survive are not the Rambo people, but like the people who care about each other and take care of each other. And
Yeah.
so that is super hope punk,
Yeah. Yeah.
buried in the middle of this like super violent post-apocalyptic
Yeah.
world. I tend to write more not the apocalypse, like near future.
Mhm.
And that's with great intention, because a lot of our dystopias are post-apocalyptic. A lot of the post-apocalyptics are dystopias. It's almost like we want to just wipe the slate clean and start over.
Mhm.
And maybe there's a little bit of, hey, humanity, you're paying for your sins. Most of you get to die, but there's a few of us that get to survive
Right.
and have like a new start. Um, and that's fun. And I think it's a good vehicle, but it's been used a lot. And the missing space in storytelling, that I'm trying to fill at least, is that more near future, more like, how do we get from here to that better place?
Mhm.
And my story is going to be somewhere halfway in between, where we're struggling to figure it out. We're partway down the road, but we're not all the way there for sure. We probably never will be, because the struggle never ends.
Right.
But like, we can't wait around for the apocalypse to just like wipe things clean for us. That's not how it's going to
Right.
work.
Mhm.
We need to
Mhm.
figure a better way.
And so that I'm gonna take a leap and say that's kind of what motivated you to start writing this genre.
Yes and no. Like,
Okay.
I kind of backed into writing, well, the genre, yes, because the genre predates my most recent series. If you go back to like the last book of Singularity, that's very much hope punk.
Hmm.
So for years prior to that, I was wayfinding of like, we need a new way to do this. Like, what I've
Mhm.
been doing is not working for me anymore. Like,
Right.
we need to do something new. And so when I actually started this new series that I just finished, the Nothing is Promised series, it was in the depth of the summer of 2020.
Mm.
And I was reeling like everybody else with everything that was going on. And I needed, I say often I built myself a raft because I needed to survive. And that was my raft, is this new story that was essentially going to be like, how do we survive? How do
Right.
we get out of this?
Right.
And what does that look like?
Right.
And what are the key things that we have to learn how to do, like work together? So
Yeah.
that motivated that series. It wasn't like I said, and it was like halfway through the first book, I was like, oh, this is super hope punk. You finally decided to really do this. Okay.
Right. It wasn't that you sat down and said, I'm gonna write Hope Punk. You wrote the thing and then said, oh, I just wrote Hope Punk.
Yeah, we're doing
Yeah.
this now.
They're
And then
doing it.
since then I've been a lot more intentional about it,
Hmm.
and really studied what it's about and how do you do that? How do you tell stories like that? Because it is not easy,
Hmm.
because it kind of goes counter to all of our built-in ideas about what storytelling is. It's the lone hero who goes out and slays the dragon. Or,
Hmm.
the Hope Punk version of that would be like a group of friends goes and befriends the dragon. that through a vast
Right.
misunderstanding has been like
Right.
raising their fields, but it's really
Right.
just hungry.
Right.
so let's meet everybody's needs. And then like, like that makes it sound a little more simplistic. And I don't want to do that because it's not like,
No, and
it's
that's not what your
easy.
books are.
No.
No. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely one of the purposes I think of storytelling is to help us kind of make sense of our world and how we relate to each other. And like in that way, you're sort of you're doing the Lord's work of trying to figure that out. Um, my my husband brought something up really funny the other day. He said, "Why has there never been anything written about how in Star Trek, which is the ultimate hope punk?
Sure.
Um, why has there never been anything written about that period of time of humanity getting its act together?" And the
Right.
answer is, I think, because we don't know how to write that.
Right.
And
Right.
to me, I feel like that's kind of almost what you're doing. No?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's how do we get from here to there?
Hmm.
And because it's one thing to hold up the ideal, and even if you're willing to compromise on the ideal and say,
Hmm.
okay, it's never going to be perfect,
Hmm.
but how do we just even start down the road? What does the road even look like?
Hmm.
What baby steps do I take
Hmm.
now to
Right.
start moving that direction? And it's like having a lighthouse, that either is telling you where to stay away or telling you how to get back home. Um, you need some kind of compass heading. And I think it's deeper than just having a destination or a compass
Hmm.
heading, because if you don't know how to like sail your boat together, if you can't get everybody like rowing in the same direction,
Hmm.
you're never going to get there.
Right.
Like, no matter how much you can see what it is that you want. So, that idea of, a more collaborative story, because, like you say, the stories are how we understand how to be in the world.
Hmm.
It's like our blueprints for living, right?
Hmm.
So, and they come in like an infinite variety, right? Because we are infinitely variable people, right?
Hmm.
So what works for me is not always going to work for everybody else, but
Right.
within that variety we have a lot of holes, because we have gotten into some pretty strong ruts,
Hmm.
I think, with storytelling.
Yes.
And that makes it even harder to break out, because you've just been like we are right here in 2023. Everyone who's been on the planet for however many years has been steeped in storytelling their entire lives.
Right.
We are experts at stories and all the different forms of media, story, games, movies, TV,
Hmm.
books, all of
Hmm.
it. Why do we keep telling the same story? Because we think that's the way the world is, and there's some real ways that that's the way the fictional world is and not how the real world is.
Right.
And we need to bring some of that into alignment if we're going to have it actually work for us and not just be, fun escapism, which also serves a really important function.
Oh yeah.
uh, so I'm not dismissing that at all. um, but there's more to it, and we always want more than, even in our fun escapism, we want some affirmation of values that we believe in,
Yep.
positive and negative,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So we're always looking for that in our stories. Stories are incredibly powerful, and that's what I do now. Like, for
Hmm.
the last dozen years I'm a storyteller. And so in this time, this huge transitional time that we're in, I want to use my skills and my privileges and my abilities. Like, not everybody can do what I can do, and I don't mean that like I'm a superhuman. It's just like I have my unique set of things that I know how
Hmm.
to do, and the capacity to do certain things, and I want to use that for good. It's pretty basic.
Yeah. Awesome. Now I want to switch gears a little bit because there's many, many parts to the art and craft of storytelling.
Mhm.
Um, so I personally have never resonated with those writer procrastination memes, like, oh, you want a writer to clean the house, tell them to sit down and write.
Mm.
you meanwhile, you have upwards of what, 15 novels, 16,
Um,
or is it?
See the bookcase,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
this
that's
bookcase here is SKQ, and this is my
yeah.
secret pen name. So
Uh,
no, there's like more like
so,
70 combined.
wow, okay. So that's a lot.
Yeah.
At least, I mean, and just from watching you again on social media, like you're always working on something. Um, at least from an outsider's point of view, you seem like one of the most disciplined writers I know. Is that true?
Um, yes and no. I would say rather than discipline, I would say obsessed. So, it's
Okay.
and on the more positive end, writing serves a very strong psychological need for
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
Like I need to be writing to just be like level
Right.
and stable and
Mhm.
happy-ish in my
Yep.
life.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
Same.
and I know that most painfully, most recently, because there was about a year after my dad passed away in August of 2021. And
Sorry.
from the time he got sick until like 6, 8, 9 months after, I just could not write at all. And it was awful. And I honestly didn't know if I was ever going to be able to write again because
Yeah.
my heart and my brain and my emotion, I was just absolutely drained and
Yeah.
I could not do anything. And that is a horrible, horrible space for a writer to be in. So, everybody has their own process, their own way of getting to expressing their creativity.
Hmm.
But if you're blocked, like you have all my sympathy because I know it happens. I never thought it would happen to me, though, like this wildly prolific writer person. And then I hit the wall of, I wasn't even burnt out. I had an emotional trauma
Right.
and it set me back. And like,
Hmm.
that happens. And
Hmm.
so like give yourself the gift of grace with
Sure.
whatever you're going through, because like the world, I'm sorry, is a hot mess.
Yes. Yes.
Like
Yeah.
eco grief and trauma is a thing.
Hmm.
Uh, all kinds of trauma. It's people are experiencing huge amounts of trauma in the world right now.
Hmm.
So, for some of us, that can be disabling in your creativity. And so I ended up actually leaving for a month. I went and locked myself into a tiny house for a month on the Chesapeake Bay
Wow.
in order to see if I could get it back because I was not at all sure that I could.
Did,
And
did that work?
it, it worked. It
Wow.
worked. But my God, that was a tough month. I tell you, and like that was required
Hmm.
for me to get there. So now that I have it back, like
Hmm.
I am just so again in that obsessed mode. Like I don't want to ever lose it again because it's so vital to me to express myself. Like I don't know what my problem is, but like
Right.
that's who I am. So might as well put it to work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm very much the same way in that, and actually at the beginning of the pandemic, I shut down for a couple months where it was just like, nope, sorry, nothing happening.
Yeah.
And that is very scary. But I think that, you know, so note to any writers who are watching, month in a tiny house, Chesapeake Bay,
If you can
clears
swing
it'll clear it
it's
right up.
it is pretty cool. So
So, all right. So I want to talk about your series, the new series, the Nothing is Promised series.
great.
So I finished the first book, which sets up this gripping mystery surrounding the theft of electricity from the power island. We get very attached to your main character, Lucia, and we end the book kind of concerned for her safety and the safety of her family. And then the second book picks up with a completely different main character, and at first I wanted to throw it across the room. So,
I'm
um,
sorry.
but I've seen, and I apologize, I get emotional about these things, but I've seen series try to do that before, um,
Hmm.
and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. It's a very ballsy move, and it did. I feel so far, and I haven't finished the series, but I feel so far like it is working. But why did you make the decision to do that?
That was a very conscious decision. And I don't know if you can see up here above me is the
Yep.
4 cover spread for the
Hmm.
series, which is one continuous image.
Hmm.
And the titles are a continuous phrase.
Hmm.
Um, my my sort of an attempt at how do you tell a larger story about a larger a crisis that's happening to the entire world. There is no one person who
Hmm.
is the hero of this story. There
Hmm.
cannot be. And so how do you do that in fiction? This was one attempt, one of my attempts. I actually have had a few along the way now, on how to do that. And so you'll see it even in the description that the series are what I call tightly connected.
Yeah.
So each of the 4 books,
Hmm.
they stand alone, they have their own main character, and their own main character has their own personal life, just like
Hmm.
we all have our own personal life
Hmm.
things that are
Yep.
happening,
Yep.
but they have this larger mystery that's connecting them together. And it is a little bit like a relay race
Mm.
where one passes the baton to the next, which passes the baton to the next. And they get to a point where they're like, this is all that I can do. And I have done my part.
Hmm.
And now I need you to take the lead.
Hmm.
And that goes through the whole series intentionally, and I kind of turn that up to 11 in the 4th book, which you will see
Oh
when you
boy.
get there.
Okay.
But it's a very intentional approach to try to deconstruct some of that expectation that we're going to live with this one person. This one person takes up 90% of the oxygen of the world and the problem that we have to solve.
Hmm.
And that's just not how any of this really is going to work. And
Right.
it's completely ignoring our superpower as a species, which is that we work together and we
Hmm.
have networks and we collaborate
Right.
and we do pass the baton,
Hmm.
and we don't like have to be the only one that does everything. And that's a theme that I keep through the whole series, but
Hmm.
especially in the last book.
Hmm.
There's I had a lot to say about that. That last book was
Okay.
like, well, I was coming out, I was in the tiny house writing that book. So I had
Okay.
a few things to say about that.
Okay.
Um,
Duly noted.
so you'll have to let me know when you get to the end
Okay.
of it. I I feel like this is one approach. It's not like the only or best even approach. It's somewhat in parallel. I started my series before I read Ministry for the Future by Kim
Hmm.
Stanley Robinson,
Hmm.
but that's often held up as a utopian near future climate fiction series or
Hmm.
book. It's one book, one huge book,
Yeah.
but he has like 50 POVs in that book, and I'm like not exaggerating. Like there literally are like he has 2 main characters that weave through, but he's
Mhm.
got like all of these different things. And I've heard him speak a number of times. He's such an
Mhm.
inspirational speaker. So if you ever get a
Mhm.
chance, but he talked about his intentionality with that and
Mhm.
how it was a global story and you need to tell it with global perspective.
Mhm.
And like, how do you do that as a writer? So I feel like if Kim Stanley Robinson is trying to figure it out, like
Mhm.
I feel like we're all kind of figuring it out right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think what's working for me about it, the way that you've done it, is that even though the mystery kind of drops off a cliff at the end of that book, you've satisfied her emotional stakes.
Right.
So, at least we know that emotionally she's ending the story in a good place. And, I had to go on to the next book just sort of with faith that, they're going to be okay. Um, but
Right.
because you did satisfy their story, like it does still stand alone, even though the mystery continues into the next story.
Right, which as a writer, I mean, I've written lots of series. Like you have to give the reader something at the end of every book
Hmm.
that says this piece of the story has come to conclusion. And yet there's more. And so like and yet there's more that most people don't have a problem with. Even with a huge cliffhanger at the end, they might not have a problem with it as long as you give them, and it's a very reasonable expectation. If I read a book, I would like to have some kind of resolution to something.
Right.
And for this series, for me, that was the often very deeply personal stakes that each of the characters have. Some trauma or difficulty or thing that they need to resolve. And because like who among us doesn't have like stuff going on that we would like to be able to resolve? So, and that's a piece of it. Like she's not going to go off, the main character from the first book, she's not going to go off and save the world and sacrifice all of her friends and all of her family and all of like, we should not have to do that, right? Like we should be able to have lives and satisfying personal relationships and lives, as well as do the things that are necessary to make sure that the world is okay too. So that was a very important, like, I want these people to be taken care of. I'm the author, I'm taking care of them.
Yeah.
In the end.
Well, it's funny. I think it's like we still have this emotional need to like have a mythic hero figure that we just pile everything onto. And it so rarely is really like that.
And not only that, but sometimes we internalize that too much. And we think that we have to be the heroic mythic figure. We can't rely on anyone else. And that is ultimately very toxic and destructive, and it eats people up.
Yeah.
And part of this sort of hope punk and solar punk, we haven't talked about solar punk, but it's sort of like the eco hope punk idea is that no, care work is important. Taking care of people is important.
Right.
We should not ask people to like kill themselves to do what? Like, what's the point of that? Like the whole point is supposed to be like people thriving. And if we're like, yeah, but you have to like die or you have to sacrifice yourself. Like, really, why? Why are we giving that message?
Right.
So I would like us to fix things. And an integral part of that is fixing people and making like in the sense of like fixing their situation so that they can thrive, that they have what they need in the world to thrive. So it's a healing approach as opposed to a slaying approach.
Yeah. So. No, there's I think there's maybe not enough of that in the world.
I agree. That's why I'm writing them.
Yes, yes. You're doing the flying spaghetti monsters work.
Awesome.
So let's talk about the gorilla in the room, generative AI. You have a statement on your website that all your stories were generated by you and not with the assistance of any form of AI. So
all human made.
What do you think about generative AI? And don't be shy.
I've been very outspoken about my belief that there's a lot of problems with this, specifically for writers. I personally am abstaining, boycotting using any generative AI tools whenever humanly possible to do, because it is literally being proliferated into everything. Right. Intentionally, that's part of this. There's a lot of really manipulative stuff going on right now with the tech industry. Proliferating a new technology that's hugely disruptive across almost, like half of the industries of the world. And there's a lot of manipulative sorts of like, if you don't accept it, you're a Luddite, or these sort of PR campaigns of like, either you should completely accept everything with no questions, and if you don't keep going and you'll be like left behind, or you should be afraid that we are about to unleash the rampaging AI that's going to consume the world. And those are the only two real options that you can have according to the framing. But the reality is in the middle, which is that no, this is a choice that was made to proliferate this technology really, really fast in an overwhelming way. So you feel like it's inevitable. You can't resist. You can't do anything about it. You must not regulate it. You must not pass any laws. Just ignore that we violated laws already on the books, like for copyright protection, blatantly. And ignore all the jobs that are already being like eliminated, and also like the entire arts industry that we've decided to just wholesale attack and like extract all of the words that you've written and all of the images that you've made, and we're just going to take that and churn it through the machine and use it to make profits. I'm like, wow, no wonder you don't want us looking at what you're actually doing. That's why you're framing it as this huge like thing. And people like get on that. Like it's either gonna kill us or everything's great.
Right.
And it's not those. It's much more terrifying and transformative than that. And I cannot control it. I can control what I do and my response. I use my words. So I speak about it. I try to help people see this middle thing that's actually happening. And I do my piece. I don't support AI works. I very early on had to, one of my first traditionally published works was in a magazine, was going to have some AI art with it. And I was like, I don't feel like I can do this. And that was right in the transition. So we were kind of caught in this moment where nobody really understood what was happening. And we worked it out, and the editor was great, and they worked with me, and we came to a position where we weren't going to use the AI art, and I could just publish my story, and it was all good. But from that point on, so in a way, I was an early test case of like it very quickly came very personally into my life, and said, you have to make a choice. Are you going to be okay with this, or are you going to like put on your professional standing on the line to make a moral position? And I was like, oh yeah, moral position all the way, because that's who I am. So having taken that stance, I'm like, okay, from now on, I'm just going to be upfront about it before I even co-sign with anybody. Like, there will be no AI art. I'm not even going to like submit my stories to people unless they have a statement on their position about AI art, AI stories, so I cannot patronize this exploitative thing that is happening right now. That's the one piece that I can do. And it's a very small piece, but again, we don't have to save the world. I don't have to go out and kill AI. All right. I have to do my part and work collaboratively with my friends and use my skills and my words to try to work for a world where we minimize the harms. So I'm writing to my congressman and saying, hey, that AI Bill of Rights that the Biden administration floated last October, you need to get on that. You need to start putting that into legislation. You need to form that agency like the FDA, but for AI, that says, no, we have some rules and regs about what kind of safety, what kind of red teaming, what kind of protocols you have to follow before you can just release shit into the world. Okay, because there's harms that will happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I'm sorry, like a total rant there, but
no. This is the Susan show. So
oh god,
that was the point. It's always, it's so strange to me, or I guess not strange, but just terribly unimaginative, that what these folks want to do with robots and artificial intelligence is just to duplicate people. You
Yeah.
know, like why can't they just be fabulous machines and fabulous AIs that do things that we can't do?
Right. Right. Why can't it make things better? Because ultimately the goal is not
Mhm.
to make things better. The goal is to make things more profitable for
Right.
companies. That's 100% the problem. And with a even more bizarre tinge of where there's this little cult thing going on where they're gonna do the Frankenstein thing and invent new life, and like they're on this quest of power, and I'm like, that is so twisted and also a good way to come up with some really bad things. Have you ever read the book or seen the movies? Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Well, and and it's like for me at least, it's not necessarily even that I'm afraid, there's all the Skynet jokes flying around. And it's like, yeah, I'm not really afraid of Skynet. I'm more kind of afraid of the people who made Skynet.
Exactly. It's because it's people who are driving all of it. Okay. It's not, and but they want you to think, they want you to be scared of Skynet. They
Hmm.
want you to be worried about that, because as soon as you can be reassured that it's not that, oh, then we're all fine. Everything's good. See, it's not rampaging. It's Bing bot. It's friendly. And it's like, okay, again, we're back to those two dichotomies where either you're terrified or you're completely accepting. And the middle is you should be pissed. You should be pissed off that they freaking stole all of your favorite artists and all your favorite music and uh, writers, and like literally like scraped everything that humanity has made. They just stole that
Hmm.
and turned it into a money machine for themselves. And by the way, the reason why it's a money machine is because it's putting a whole bunch of people out of work. So you should be pissed about that, and how what that means for your individual life. I have no idea. Like, you're going to have to make your own choices about that. We all are. But the right thing to happen to like not have complete catastrophe is to get really much better about putting rules and regulations on technology,
Yeah.
so that they can't just the companies can't just rampage all over and do whatever they want regardless of harm. There's no reason we don't allow that for anybody else, and well, sometimes we do, unfortunately, but it's
Yeah.
never good.
Yeah. Yeah. I've definitely been, I would say, unimpressed with some of the ethics or lack thereof surrounding that
Well,
whole
I mean,
thing.
they literally fired, like, what, Microsoft fired their entire AI ethics team. It's like, bold of you. Okay, you're just like not even trying to hide the fact that you're like, no ethics for us.
Yeah. And then, and then you add in stupid stuff like Elon trying to, do those brain implant chips. Like they're not even trying to pretend that they aren't trying to create the Borg.
Right.
The Borg were
Oh
not
yeah.
supposed to be aspirational.
Right, right. But sometimes for some weird, like, not quite all there billionaire types, yeah, they kind of live in a fantasy world where they have the ultimate power and money and control. They can do whatever they want, and ha 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 world. Like, Elon Musk is like trolling the entire world full time. Like, that's his full-time job now, is to troll the world. And it's like, wow, dude, like, it's really sad for you, but also like really sad for us. We have to deal with your shit.
Yeah. 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 It's these folks that just sort of feel the need to inflict themselves on us. It's
Well, they have the power to inflict themselves on us. And the truth is that we collectively have way more power,
mm,
but we have to be organized and work together
mm,
and understand that. We have to understand that we have actual power. Most of the times we don't. We think we're powerless, which is 100% what they want you to think. And I'm not saying it's easy to exercise that power. It's very difficult, but that's a
Right.
long stretch from impossible.
Right.
Long stretch. So I
And
have hope.
that's
I'm
why you're
still
writing Hopepunk.
That's right. I have to, if I'm going to be a hope punk author, I'm going to have some hope about the future. So the hope is, I think that humanity actually does know these things. If you get right down to it, we know who people are when people are jerks and acting in ways that are anti-human. We fundamentally we do understand that. We tell a lot of stories to ourselves sometimes that contradict that. And so we can get kind of confused and like overwhelmed and tired and like the world is on fire. So a lot of that can muddy this, but when it gets down to it, when you get to brass tacks, I think people do understand and they do come together. If you look at any actual crisis where like you have an emergency flood situation or a fire situation, there is like most people, not all people, okay, but most people come together instinctively. They cooperate, they share, they coordinate, they organize. They're like, okay, how can we get this person what they need? Get that person to the rescue thing. And, like we instinctively do that.
Right.
It's almost like it's so strong, it has to be drummed out of us. And so the larger culture that is this exploitive, extractive culture has drummed it out of us for a long time. And we just got to get it back.
Couldn't agree more.
You got me ranting here, girl. Don't ask me questions like this. I'm going to give my opinion.
That's what I'm here to get. That was the good
you're doing
stuff.
A good job.
So we're kind of getting to the end of our time. And the format of this is that at the end, I'm going to ask my guests to share some words that move them or are important to them in some way, whether it's poetry, fiction, essays, or what have you. So what have you brought today?
I have a quote, a short passage I would like to read from Rebecca Solnit's Hope in the Dark, which I believe was published in 2016 and then had like, an update or something. She's quite an inspiration to me. She talks a lot about hope and how to navigate the Anthropocene and how to survive and how we're going to survive as a species. So she's a huge inspiration. So this is from her book.
Okay.
Most of us would say, if asked, that we live in a capitalist society, but vast amounts of how we live our everyday lives, our interactions with and commitments to family lives, friendships, avocations, membership in spiritual and social and political organizations, are in essence non-capitalist or even anti-capitalist, full of things we do for free out of love and on principle. In a way, capitalism is an ongoing disaster. Anti-capitalism alleviates, like a mother cleaning up after her child's messes. Or, to extend the analogy, sometimes disciplining that child to clean up after itself through legislation or protest, or preventing some of the messes in the first place. And it might be worth adding that non-capitalist ways of doing things are much older than free market economic arrangements. Activists often speak as though the solutions we need have not yet been launched or invented, as though we were starting from scratch, when often the real goal is to amplify the power and reach of existing alternatives. What we dream of is already present in the world. And I just love that.
That is fantastic.
So I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to dream up stories that help us imagine a future where we can do it different and better. And learning those lessons now with me and 1,000 other people can write stories like that. And it can all like start to percolate out. I'm not the only one doing this work. And I think a lot of people are doing the work without even realizing they're not hanging the Hopepunk name on it, but they're still doing that kind of work. They're looking for optimistic stories, they're cooperative stories. They want to envision a better way, and they do that through activism or nonfiction or reporting or, even just working in families, building mutual aid networks, doing the actual construction of the kinds of, cooperative societies that we need to build that anti-capitalist society.
Right.
So it's happening.
It is. No, it is. You see it. I mean, it's the real life embodiment of, be the change.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, I think we're at time, so I am going to say thanks for chatting with me today. And
Thank you so much for letting me rant and come on your
no, this
show.
is I'm thrilled to have you, and maybe we'll do this again at some
Absolutely.
point.
It's been a pleasure.
Yes, me too. All right, take care. Bye
You
bye.
too. Bye.